Good morning. How's everyone? So we'll just start with a little devotional here this morning. I'm really enjoying these classes. Thank you, Pastor Philippe. This has been a precious time. Okay, just quick. We'll just open to two passages. 2 Corinthians chapter 4. We'll read first, and then also Romans chapter 1. Okay, so we'll just 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 7. Says this, but we have this treasure in earthen vessels, that the excellence of the power may be of God and not of us. And we are hard pressed on every side, yet not crushed. We are perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed, always carrying about in the body the dying of the Lord Jesus, that the life of Jesus also may be manifested in our body. And then Romans chapter 1. And in verse 28, speaking of those who have rejected the Creator that they know, through the suppression of truth. So verse 28, it says, and even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a debased mind to do those things which are not fitting, being filled with all unrighteousness, sexual immorality, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, evil-mindedness. They are whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, violent, proud, boasters, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, undiscerning, untrustworthy, unloving, unforgiving, unmerciful, who knowing the righteous judgment of God, that those who practice such things are deserving of death, not only do the same, but also approve of those who practice them. Let's just pray. So, Heavenly Father, we just again this morning we've come with open ears, open hearts, and we just ask that your Spirit would speak to our inner man, and just bless this short word in Jesus' name, Amen. Something Pastor Philippe has mentioned a number of times in the classes is that the man who has little confidence and little knowledge, little confidence in what he confesses that he believes, the louder and more kind of obnoxious he must become to defend his position. I think there is a very beautiful and holy thing for us to really honestly, before God, let God examine the depths and every angle and every perspective on the things that we confess, that we believe, that the Bible is true, Jesus is raised from the dead, and that really the nature of God and the nature of Jesus Christ is such that Jesus does not mind being misunderstood on the surface. On the surface of things, by appearance, when men attacked him at his trials with false accusations, he didn't care. He didn't answer back. He allowed the fleshly understanding just to continue in its misunderstanding. God doesn't care to reveal himself to natural man or to the flesh. but also this is another side of the nature of the flesh and the natural man and the men of this world. Is so often we put a lot of weight on the appearance of things, and we think that. How many of you know what is bondo? You know what is bondo? Some of you maybe fixed cars, or ever buy a used car. A car that's had an accident or a car that has had rust. What they do to repair it, they have this putty. It's like kind of amazing stuff, and it fills in all the gaps and the holes, and it's not metal, but it fills in the holes and the rust and gives an appearance that the car is sound and strong, and but actually underneath the paint job is just this bondo, this clay, this dust. And now, if you don't really care about the appearance of the car, you can test and find out if there's bondo. You can just take a knife or take your key and scratch along and just peel back the paint, and the bondo would be. You can see, there's bondo under there. This is fake. It's not metal under there. But because we care about the appearance, I care about the paint job. I'm not going to go and scratch and test the car this way before I buy it. I'm going to just follow the appearance and just think, okay. One time when we were in Thailand, my wife and I, we went and bought a bicycle for Caleb. And it was this bicycle, we bought it brand new. And when we got it home, he tried riding it, and we realized that the gears were out of alignment, and the whole thing was like, it was brand new, but it was twisted. It was like a waste of money. So we took the bike back to the store, and we told the sales lady, you know what, this bike is all out of alignment. It's like it's not sound. We want our money back. And she was just like, no, I'm sorry, we can't do anything. It's like the thing is mechanically unsound, but she didn't listen to us at all. But then when they sold it to us, there was like this cardboard like covering and protecting the chrome on the handlebars. And so then finally at the end we were getting so frustrated. And then I said, now look at this. Look at this. Underneath the cardboard, when you sold it, there was a scratch. There was a scratch on the handlebar. And she goes, oh, I'm sorry. It was like, and so then she changed her mind, and we gave us the money back because there was a scratch. It seems so, like it was she was so concerned about what was so superficial. But the mechanics of the bike, she didn't relate. It's not going to work. And it's an amazing picture of the flesh and this earthen vessel, and actually the understanding of the mind wants to be so satisfied with the outward appearance and not really concerned about the genuineness of what really works. And I think there's many times as Christians we may fear going, like studying deeply, really going deeply because into my faith. Sometimes we just settle for a superficial faith, a superficial confidence, and then when we get into our, discussions and soul winning on the streets, or go to another country like Thailand, or and the people are talking with you about reality from a whole nother perspective. And one of the most important things that happened to me when I went to Thailand is I said, okay, I've been through Bible college. I think just like Pastor Philippe said, I studied, I got good grades, but do I really believe what I say I believe? And I said, God, you got you got to show me. Is this book really right? Is it true? If I dig deep, am I going to find Bondo? If I I dig deep, am I going to find sawdust in the transmission system of the car? If I dig deep, am I going to find out that the sprockets are all misaligned? And no. Many times, surface-wise, there are many ambiguities in the Bible. There are many things. When I study the Bible very superficially, there's so many ambiguities. There's so many things that are confusing. But when you go deep, when you scratch away the paint, when you take off the layers, and we dig deep, we find these things that are there's a treasure. There's gold. It's not Bondo, it is gold. And go ahead and wipe away all the outward appearance and all the pretending, and remove all the paint, and dig deep, and we're going to find treasure. And this one verse in Romans 1 is an example of just how amazing it is to me, the preciseness of the Holy Spirit. In English, these words of knowing, to know, knowledge, it can become so ambiguous. Even the word salvation, to be saved, this is love. Do you love me? In English, these concepts can be so ambiguous, so confusing. But when you dig down and go into the Greek and see what the Holy Spirit really inspired, here in Romans 1:28 and 32, when it speaks about knowledge, even those who did not like to retain God in their knowledge, that Greek word is epinosis. That's just not a knowledge about. It's not just a superficial knowing. This is epinosis. Epinosis speaks of something God has spiritually revealed to their hearts, and they cannot deny it. And in verse 32, who knowing the righteous judgment of God, knowing the righteous epinosis, the unbeliever, the one who refuses to thank and glorify God, who suppresses truth, he knows. He knows it's been revealed to his heart by God. And on the day of judgment, he cannot deny it. He knows, knowing the righteous judgment of God. And I love it that when we dig deep, the Holy Spirit, we find gold, we find treasure. And if you want to look at my Christian life outwardly, you're just going to find clay. You're going to, the appearance of Bondo. And you know what? I don't care. It's okay. It's okay. If you want to know us just superficially, you will misunderstand us and what our faith is about. But if you're really honest and you dig deep, you're going to find God. And it's a treasure. And it's real. And there's nothing fake about it. Okay? Amen.
Does it work? Yes, it does. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Stephen. I don't know if you noticed, but I'm sure I don't know if it was on purpose or not, but what he said actually applies very much to what we said about apologetics and the comparison about the idea of the bike is very interesting because it's twisted in its own, structure, but the scratch is a bother. So I think this is exactly the same when we argue with people that have we have been talking since yesterday. We're going to continue this morning to talk about atheism. And remember we said about understanding that if the Bible is true and we believe to be true, then there is no argument that could stand against it. But if you argue against atheism and it is not true and we believe it is not true, then they will have to defend themselves with arguments, adding up some other arguments, and end up in foolishness, the madness, as Chesterton said. And they will be bothered with a scratch on the bike, because on the cosmetic level, it doesn't communicate very well. But if you attack the structure, they won't care about this, because the structure is an assumption that the twisted is fine. That's the way it is. A twisted bike is as much valuable as a normal bike, because we're in relativism. And one day at the staff meeting, Pastor Brian said, I don't know if you noticed the entryway. If you look at it, you look at the entryway, you see, I'm going to draw it. Not that I'm good for drawing, but I need to. Oh, it's not on. If you look at the entryway, you see, so you have steeple, you have the cross, and then you have, when you look from the back, you see that the walls on the plaza has an angle. It's not straight. It goes up. From the bottom right to Bible College. If you go all the way to Family Center, you see it's not straight. So when they put up the steeple and the entryway, the entry looked crooked because it was straight. And Pastor Brian said, this is the picture of the church. The church looks crooked because it's straight and the world is twisted. This is exactly, I think, what Pastor Steve was referring to. And so I don't think I need to draw it, you understand the point. But if you look outside, you'll see they had to do something, actually. So did the church compromise? I don't know. It would be interesting to ask Pastor Brian, what does that mean according to your image? Did you compromise? What happened? Where is it? Just go put it up for today. Here we are. Okay, I'm going to draw it for you. So this is how the wall is, right? So we had the entryway put up like this. So you see the line of the entryway and the steeple are not straight. But actually, this is straight, perfectly straight, but this is wrong. And this is what he said. Is that, so now they had to do something like this to make it look straight. But actually, if you take this off, and this is what happens when you have the idea of, quickly in a superficial way. If you think about this in a superficial way, and you look at it for the first time, you're thinking, wow, the church is crooked. Wow, as Christopher Hitchens would say, well, religion poisons everything. God is not great. But think about this. The way you think, the reason why you think this way is because you're crooked. And if I live like this, then you guys you're all having a trouble. How can you stand? I mean, I'm looking at you guys, I'm just wondering, how can you sit so still on your chair? If I would be in your place, I would be so uncomfortable. I mean, you like this. I mean, your bottle, Rita, doesn't move. It's amazing. It's a different law of gravity. My law of gravity, I don't know what's happening with me. It's my law of gravity on my world pushes me to the left. I don't know how you guys do it, but you are amazing. And your guys are all crooked. You know that. And this is, I think, what's happening with atheism. People look at us and thinking, wow, you don't have your facts straight. And this is what we're addressing right now. Remember what we said about we're entering into discussing atheism. So we're going to continue where we started last night. And basically what we'll do is, I'm just going to go back to how we started. Okay, this is where we were yesterday. And we were saying, excuse me. We were saying yesterday that we have 4 problems with atheism. And the idea is not that I have problems with atheism, because I'm not an atheist, so it does not impact my life. But I'm talking about evangelism. I'm meeting someone who is a non-believer. He says he's an atheist. I need to draw his attention to the problems that there is with atheism, meaning that he doesn't realize that his philosophy doesn't stand. his philosophy is not on a solid ground. His philosophy is on quicksand. So we said yesterday that there is 4 points we can bring up into discussion. And remember what we said also. I'm just trying to put everything back into the context. Where is it? What we are doing right now is using our offensive apologetics. And offensive apologetic is based on 2 Corinthians 10:5. It looks like it's 6. 2 Corinthians 10:5, meaning that we are here to cast down imaginations and every lofty thing that elevates itself against the knowledge of God. And what actually prevents people to know God is when they look at us and think we're crooked, because they are crooked. So the idea of actually, the idea of suppressing the truth that we said yesterday is to make it for people to think it's okay to be crooked. It's okay to have an untwisted bike. And we are trying actually to tell them, no, it's not okay. If you buy a bike, it should be straight. If you ride a bike, it should be straight. And every time I ride my bike, I'm dizzy, But you should not be dizzy when you ride the bike. The reason why you're dizzy is because your bike is twisted. And this is exactly what we're talking about. We're trying to make a point by saying, okay, the reason why... Oh, I'm getting a text, you can tell. The reason why you're dizzy and the reason why you're not comfortable in your life and you don't have the answers of the questions you have is because your philosophy cannot answer your deepest questions and your philosophy cannot stand. So what we're doing is actually showing them, number one, that if you believe that there is no God, then you're left with materialism. We spoke about that yesterday night. I don't want to come back to it, but the idea we said is that materialism destroys humanity, really, because it's shrinking down the reality. Man is no longer the center of the creation as we believe the Bible puts him, but he's only matter, atoms, and in nothing else, just matter. So if we are matter, there is no difference between us, a table, and a chicken, or a cockroaches, or whatever you want. There is no difference. Then you cannot be an atheist if you're a materialist and a humanist in the same time, because you cannot value man if man has no value. This is not possible. So we spoke about that last night. Now what we want to do, and we spoke about this quote from Chesterton, this quote also, and then we went on the second point, being that you have no explanation for reason if you believe that there is no God. And we have this quote that we read yesterday, and we don't want to read it again, but the point that C.S. Lewis is making here is very simple. If there is no God, then my brain was not designed, and what I call thought is just a byproduct of evolution. And we know that the basis for evolution is randomness. Now, if my thoughts or if my brain is a byproduct of evolution, then my thoughts should reflect the reality of evolution, which is randomness. People will say I don't agree with this because obviously the biological life is everything but randomness. So why should our thinking be random? Because there is no objective way to prove that thinking is right if there is no ultimate knowledge behind it. This is what we said yesterday. So we said also that if evolution destroys anything, it does not destroy religion, but it destroys rationalism, meaning that you cannot lean on your understanding. You cannot rely on your thinking if you're an evolutionist. And this is what I want to talk to you about for a minute, because this is what William Ramsay, he's a philosopher of science, he's also an evolutionist, and this is what he says. Because the question is, he said the cognitive system that generates the belief that tigers are large curly pussycats, or the belief that the best way to get near something is to run away from it, we will down the road get you into trouble. If your cognitive system is prone to these sorts of errors, then you aren't going to be around for long. What he means by that is, when you ask the question, how, as an evolutionist, you can explain the appearing of reason? Well, he will tell you the reason why we have reasoning process according to evolution is because if we don't have it, then we won't be able to make the right decisions. And this is why it's reliable. I see a tiger, I need to identify a tiger as a tiger, not as a cat. I come close to a cat, I'm fine. I'm come close to a tiger, I'm dead. So my cognitive system needs to be able to make a difference between a tiger and a cat, so I would survive. So the idea being, according to the evolutionist ground, is that the reason why we have a cognitive system, which means we have a reasoning process, is because we need it to survive. That makes sense in a way. Yeah, I mean, it is. And the thing is, I mean, it could make sense, but it raises a lot more questions than it actually answers. And one of the questions is, as we said yesterday, don't you think by doing this, you're actually making a point for God, meaning that if evolution is not a thinking entity, why would evolution think to provide reason for me? Because I would need it. That is a very important question. Now, if evolution does not think, how come a non-thinking process can think to give me thinking because I need it? That is the questions we need to think about. That's the term. So we remember what we said yesterday about evolution. What we hear every time we ask a question to scientists or philosophers of science who are evolutionists, and you ask them a question, you know, how can you explain reason, or how can you explain the eye, how can you explain the process, you know, the biological process we're in? They will always have to answer giving evolution some kind of plan and intelligence, because there has to be, so some are saying, yeah, because we don't find other words to express it. You know, this is why it sounds like we're giving it a personality. But if you are scientists, then instead of giving me a metaphor of what you're saying, give me the reality of how it works in science. I would be interested to know that also. And the thing is, we don't know. This is what they call mystery. So if Ramsey is correct, then the cognitive systems we have, meaning the reasoning we have, was given to us because we needed to survive. Now, this is the trick. If you ask William Ramsey or any other guys who are evolutionary thinkers and they don't believe that God is real, you ask them a question, where do you think the belief in God comes from? Because they don't believe that God exists. So belief in God is a false belief, according to evolution. So we have a true belief, which is I can make a difference between a tiger and a cat. And I have a false belief, which is I believe in God and I should not. Why do I believe in God according to you? Why you believe in God according to me and my philosophy? Because you're more likely to survive if you have a good religion. So religion is a process of evolution that helps us survive. Okay, so you did answer my question. I'm asking you, where does reason come from? You answered. I ask you, where's my belief in God comes from? But you actually didn't answer my question on reliability of reason. And you actually did the exact opposite, because you're telling me that sometimes my reason produces true beliefs, and sometimes my reason produces false beliefs. So if my reason produces true and false beliefs, how can it be reliable? That's the question I have. Let me repeat this, because this is very important. On the one hand, they're telling you, well, you can rely on your thinking. Even God did not make it, contrary to what our good friend C.S. Lewis said. You recall what he said. If there is no God, then we're just randomness in our thinking, so we cannot rely on it. No, he says, no, we can rely on it because we need it. So you are giving evolution some kind of attributes that we give to God: intelligence, planning, thinking. So evolution has to have some kind of personality behind it, because to actually make a plan that succeeds, you need really some amazing planning. So the point being is that you are saying that I need my cognitive faculties, I need my reasoning, because if I don't have it, it's not reliable, I will never be able to survive. But at the same time, when I ask you when my belief in God comes from, you're telling me it comes from my cognitive system too. So if my reasoning gives me true beliefs, okay, this is not a cat, this is a tiger, go away, I'm out of here. But that's good for my survival, because if I don't stay next to the tiger, we will be more likely to survive. Now, evolution thought about it and thought maybe it's good for some of them to have some kind of beliefs, because that will help them, survive also. So actually the thinking process now becomes the thinking person. Thinking becomes thinking. You know what I mean? Is that thinking becomes a person. My cognitive system, your cognitive system, is actually making a double, making choice for me what I should believe. Okay, you're going to believe that tigers are tigers and they are dangerous. You're also going to believe that God exists, though he doesn't. So, but how can my reason can be reliable for me? How can I rely on my own reason if I am fooled by it? That's the question I'm asking. Remember what we said. You have no explanation for the reliability of reason. And you are answering in a way that shows me that actually we can't rely on reason. Because sometimes it gives me true beliefs, and sometimes it gives me false belief. I don't understand how you can rely on reason. You're actually making my point. According to your theory, then thinking is randomness. Sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong, and I cannot trust it. If I can't trust my reason, then I have to conclude with C.S. Lewis when he says, but if I can't trust my own thinking, of course I can't trust the argument leading to atheism. If my thinking is not reliable, then my argument against God are not reliable. So you're not making a point. And therefore, I have no reason to be an atheist or anything else. Unless I believe in God, that's the best part. Unless I believe in God, which means unless I think I have a reliable thinking, I cannot believe in thought. So I can never use thought to disbelieve in God. Are you seeing the point? Is there any question on this? Because I think this is a very important point for you to understand, and it's maybe the most, recurs, and in the morning it's maybe the most challenging. That's Simon.
Did you say a few minutes ago that they use the word mystery, talking about how thinking evolved? I find that very interesting, that they use that word mystery.
Yes, and actually, if you were there last week, we had the Science Nights, and Pastor Tom Chong quoted a recent article from Science Magazine from June the beginning of June, and the question was very simple: how do organs know when they reach the right size in our body? How do we know that? The heart stops at certain size. How do the cells know that? And the answer to that, the article was published in Science Magazine. We don't know. It's still a mystery. So they're still using the word, and it's okay. I mean, for science to have mysteries, it's fine. Yeah, it's okay. But the point is, it's for me for science to have mystery is fine, but to have contradicting worldview, not worldview, contradicting thoughts on the same thing, then this is where the argument comes from.
But also, it's okay for them to have mysteries, but it's not okay.
It's not okay for us to have mystery. Yes, yes. So as a scientist, you don't have an answer. That's fine. But as a Christian, if you don't have an argument, then he wins the argument. Obviously, this is not very fair. But are you seeing the point that we're making this morning? Kaya?
Chesterton spoke about the barrier that we need to survive. Remember that, that we have to bounce against something.
Yes.
And I think does it relate to this? Just to have the absolutes of God that we bounce against, and
yes.
and to survive.
Yes. The thing is, we said it several times in different ways, but I think what we need to understand is, for centuries, if you study philosophy, there is one question that's never been able to be answered by philosophers: is how can we know something for sure if we don't know everything? And that's a big question, and that is a legitimate question. If I don't know everything, how can I be sure that I actually know something? Because if the thing that I know relates somehow to something else, for me to understand fully what I'm learning, I need to know how it relates to. But we don't live this way, right? When I know something, I'm thinking I'm knowing it. But deep inside in philosophy, we know that if there is no absolute truth, if there is no ultimate knowledge, and something that holds all the knowledge, then we cannot be sure of everything we know. Now, nobody believes this really, because science actually works on the idea is that there is no absolute truth. Some of them are thinking there is no ultimate knowledge. there is no God behind it. Still, every time I find something, I believe it's true because I do an experiment. But it's founded on an assumption that I believe that my sense perception and my reason are reliable. But that is, again, an assumption. I don't know if what I see is real. I can't know that. I don't even know if what you see and what I see are the same thing. I can't know that. It's not possible for me to know that. I mean, what you are calling red, I call red, but maybe what you're seeing when you call red is not the same color that I call red. We cannot know that. There is no way for us to actually know that we actually relate to reality. What I see, what you see, may be totally different. I cannot know that. When I'm speaking, maybe you hear something totally different, and you think you understand what I'm saying. We're not on the same page. I cannot know that. The reason why we know that as Christians is because we know that there is God. He has ultimate knowledge, and what He reveals to us is true. So I don't have, as a Christian, I don't have to be all knowledge, to have all knowledge, to know something to be true, because I know there is God. So what you're saying is that it's exactly the thing. I don't need to be all-knowing, because I have someone who is all-knowing. But if there is no God, then we might have some time to bring that. There is another quote from C.S. Lewis that I think explains that very well. But at some point, if you don't think there is an ultimate knowledge, then you will have to question every answer you get. But deeper than that, you have to answer your own questions. Number one, is it the final question? And number two, did I get it right? I cannot know that. I have to assume that I got it right. This is it. And as we said yesterday, I'm just going to put it back here. Where is it? No, this is it. Remember what Chesterton said about reason. Reason is itself a matter of faith. It is an act of faith to assert that our thoughts have any relation to reality at all. Meaning that I am assuming that the world around me has some kind of intelligibility for me. I am assuming that. I cannot prove it. We know it's true because the Bible says it. But if you don't believe the Bible says it, then you have to take it for granted. But you cannot prove it. And just as rationalists think that the ultimate reality is their own reason, then the empiricists thinks that the ultimate reality is their sense perception. But I cannot be doing anything else but assume that. I cannot prove it. Like, how can you prove that the only things that can be proven is through empiricism? How can you put empiricism through the test of empiricism? How can you do that? You can't. And that's the point. At some point, if you don't have God, then you have to make some assumptions. Those assumptions cannot be proven. And that's the point. I don't know if you heard the sentence, we hear it all the time, a logical assumption. To me, it doesn't make any sense. I'm just making a logical assumption. So you're saying that, you're making it up. That's what you're saying. But you add the word logical because assumptions obviously is too weak. So I'm adding the word logical to assumption, and I'm good to go. A logical assumption is still an assumption. So, in theory, we know that, when it comes down to logic, it's something else. But the idea of making a logical assumption is still an assumption. It makes sense, but if I'm thinking it is a logical assumption, so it makes sense, because I am thinking that the reliability of my reason is fine. But still, I cannot prove that. So people are arguing with me sometimes thinking, yeah, but you cannot apply this to logic. Logic is logic. How do you know that? How do you know that logic is logic? I don't know if logic is logical. I don't know that. I'm just assuming it's the case. Well, it makes sense. It makes sense in your own mind. But how do we know that my mind makes sense? How do I know that? You want to ask a question? Yes.
This kind of begs a question to me that's pretty significant. If reason could be giving us a false reality, if the Bible is true, if what God has said is true, which we all believe it is, then we don't really have the truth unless we accept the Bible as truth. So when God says, when we see a mountain there, it can't move. Physically, the laws say it's permanent, but God says you can move that mountain. So in a sense, we haven't built the true reality on this world, because it's possible, given enough energy from God in some way. I mean, I don't know what it causes that mountain to move if you choose to move it, but somehow our knowledge base is defective because we're not accepting what God said.
Yes. It's
But it's worse than it's worse than just it's a false science, and I guess that's why science keeps on changing. We keep on going from, Newton's gravity to concepts of relative, to Einstein theory of relativity to subparticles and all this crazy stuff because we don't really have the truth yet because we're not accepting God's word.
Yes.
Does that fit into your?
Yeah, I mean,
concept of what you're
it's
saying?
not exactly the same thing, but actually the point we're making is that if we will talk about that Friday night about what makes science possible. And you remember what we said that, we spoke about Oppenheimer yesterday, and not that I agree with him or, when he says that Christianity is necessary, but religious belief and a belief in some kind of ultimate reality, ultimate knowledge, something that ends. This is it, I get my answer. If I come to you, I ask you what time it is, you look at your watch. You give me the time, and I go away, I have my answer. But it's just that simple action is full of assumption. Your watch is right, you're trustworthy, you change your batteries, whatever, you thought about changing when you had saving save day, lifetime, whatever you call it in English. So all kinds of assumptions that, and we don't even wonder about these things. So by faith, I'm stopping reality to your authority. But I should not be doing this. I'm living by faith all the time. So the point we're making, the difference between the Christian and the non-Christian, is that the Christian lives on Christian ground and believes it. The non-Christian lives on Christian ground but does not believe it. That's the difference. This is what he says at some point, is that for me, you remember what Lewis said at the end? No, it's not this. Where is it? Unless I believe in God, this is what we said, I cannot believe in thoughts. Meaning that to believe in thoughts, I have to believe in God. But I don't believe in God. But we go back to what it said earlier with the borrowed capital. I am living in a world where I am set. I am created in the image of God. So whether or not I believe in God, I live like I do, even though I'm not. Richard Dawkins, when he says he does not believe in God and is thinking that, he actually presupposes the existence of God without knowing it. That's what's amazing. The idea of presupposition, we have not entered into that level yet, but we said that presupposition needs to be addressed. But beyond that, what we're trying to show is to be an atheist and thinking you're right, you have to presuppose that God exists. And it's blow their mind all the time when I say that, no, you're going too far. Let me explain to you what I mean. This is what he means by that. To think that you're reasoning, you're arguing with me, and you're so passionate about the fact that there is no absolute truth. That's amazing. Well, why are you so passionate? Or the other way would be to ask, how can you be so absolute in telling me that there is no absolute truth? Because it doesn't make any sense. You have to assume some things, and those things that you assume are exactly the things that we have in our own mind because they reflect the way we've been made. So I have to. Every scientist who is not a believer lives like there is a God. He believes that his sense perceptions are right. He believes that his reasoning and cognitive faculties works perfectly and they are reliable. And he believes that when he attains his knowledge, he can trust it. But all these, if there is no God, are just assumptions. So now the question is, you have presuppositions as a non-believer. I have presuppositions as a believer. Which one makes more sense? That's what we're talking about. And this is what Francis Schaeffer spends a lot of time dealing in his books, showing that in his mind he's thinking, this is what we need to do. And this is what, if you study logic or philosophy, this is what the philosophers call a reductio. If you want the whole sentence, it's if you use that, when I use the sentence, people think I'm intelligent because I can use some Latin words. So I do that sometimes to impress you. But In other words, it's reduction to absurdity. The idea, what we're doing right now is exactly that. I'm trying to show you that your worldview does not make any sense, and actually you're living on my ground. You're living as a Christian. You believe there is such a thing as an absolute truth. You believe that. Well, if evolution is true and God does not exist, there is no absolute truth. Doesn't make any sense. So you and I agree. We agree that our reason makes sense. We agree that we can rely on our sense perception sometimes. But we agree that generally we can do that. We agree that science is possible. We totally agree on that. But I have a reason why I can agree. I can believe that. You don't. That's the difference. Any question or comments? Pastor Kimo, you seem tempted to say something. I see your hands moving.
I'm just kind of reminded of some studies or theories that have been put out in linguistics about like common sense thinking and logical thinking. And common sense thinking is what most of us do all the time, or all of us do most of the time, but it is actually faulty. And usually it takes some training or thinking to get into logical thinking, which is not faulty. But the problem with logical thinking is that it doesn't address most of the life questions we have. So we actually need this common sense thinking to survive, even though it sometimes leads to demonstrably false conclusions.
Yes. And again, for somebody to say that, for you as a Christian to say this, I mean, it makes sense because we can rely on the logical being not faulty because we believe there is ultimate reality. But if God does not exist, I have to take by faith that logical assumptions or logical reasoning is true, because actually it means true to me because I feel this way. But I don't know why. If I don't know, I cannot prove that the way I receive logical thinking is actually reality. Maybe I'm totally wrong. Maybe we're all wrong in thinking logically. That's the idea that we have, is that people don't understand sometimes, because it does take some time to think about this. When people say, well, I know that what I'm thinking makes sense. I agree with you. I'm not saying that it doesn't make sense. I'm just saying that to make sense, you have to explain me why it makes sense. I'm not saying that Christians make sense and the non-Christians does not make sense. Both are making sense. The one can explain one, the other one cannot. That's the only thing I'm saying, right? This is what we're saying about logical thinking, is that, I mean, ask some amazing logician or mathematicians. They can have amazing reasoning and process amazing, and they don't believe in God. But they have to assume that what they are saying actually reflects reality. But I'm testing it. It's empirical. How do you know that your sense perceptions and the experiment you're setting up are reliable? Since that also, you need to make some kind of assumption. So, you know, one of the apologists I've been studying, and his name is Van Til, I quoted him a couple times, and he's saying that for him, a scientist who is not a Christian can make science progress because he's on a borrowed capital, meaning that he actually lives in God's world. He lives with God's designed brain. He can rely on it, though he cannot explain it. But you don't have to be a Christian to be a great scientist. You had at some point, we said earlier, is that because the motivation was to glorify God in nature. So they did that. And they did think that they had some absolute truth that was attainable. So that produced some great thinkers for the modern science. But at the same time, built on that, you can be a great scientist and be non-Christian because you are living on borrowed capital. You are living in God's world. And the world and us, we go together, you know, as Chesterton said, reason is itself a matter of faith if you're not a Christian. If I am a Christian, and this is funny because remember what we said about the world thinking that they have reason and we have faith? And we disputed that, saying this is not the case. You have reason, we have a different kind of reason. And we have faith, and you have a different kind of faith too. This is what we mean by that. They have faith in reason. I have good reason to believe in reason. That's the difference. But we both reason. We both lose logical thinking. The difference is you use it, but you don't know why it's reliable, though it is. And I use it, it's reliable, and I know why. That's what we're talking about. Anybody else? Shall we move on? Okay. Pastor Simon said we should move on. Okay, so what did we say so far? Number one, we said that the question we want to ask is, how can you explain the reliability of your cognitive faculties as an evolutionist? Well, number one, it's been given by us, to us by evolution, because we need it. Again, it sounds like a plan and intelligence. And actually thinking, I mean, think about this. It's kind of hard to say it because I'm going to use the word think many times in a sentence. Think about thinking. It takes thinking to think that thinking is needed. Right? I mean, the idea of thinking as a need is amazing. To find something, I don't know, I mean, if you would have to invent thinking to help your child make a difference between a tiger and a cat, how would you do that? Well, you would have to have some kind of notion of what thinking is before you can impart thinking to him. And this is where I have trouble with evolution. It gives, again, evolution attributes that we give to God. Plan, thinking, because thinking is not just a byproduct of evolution, because it's actually reliable. It makes sense, it's a plan, it works, it's perfect. We need it. So there is much more planning than what people are ready to admit. Number two, how can you say on your ground that thinking is reliable if sometimes it gives me true beliefs and sometimes false beliefs? Actually, you're telling me that my mind plays tricks on me because the overall idea is not me, it's the survival of the species, which is one, so evolution doesn't care about me. So maybe I'm wrong. So maybe I'm wrong, maybe you're wrong, and maybe you're wrong, so your arguments against God cannot be reliable either. So it's either you have a good reason to rely on your reason, or you don't, then your arguments are meaningless against God. And that's the point we're making. But further than that, let's ask some other questions about this. That it is estimated, and there is as much estimation of the number of species in the world that there are people that study it. But there is a biology magazine in August 2011 that gave an estimation of 9 million species that there is in the world, about 9 million species, different species. That's a lot of species. Now the question I have is, if cognitive faculties, the way we have it, are so important for survival, why human beings are the only ones to have it? If 9 million species are out there, why do we have very few species with cognitive faculties the way we have? I mean, reasoning process. They do have cognitive faculties. I mean, of course, an animal in the jungle knows that a tiger is dangerous, but he's been educated for that. So we're not talking about tigers and cats. We're talking about the reasoning process as a whole. If reasoning thinking is so valuable for the survival of species, why are we limited? Why not all 9 million species have it? That would be helpful for everyone, right? That would be helpful for a shell to make, maybe he would be, don't you think like a snail would be happy to be able to do mathematics to improve his life? Maybe he could think about making, how do you say a snail, the house of a snail, how do you call that? A shell? Don't you think a shell in carbon shell would be better for him because he could go faster? I would be happy as a snail if you give me the capacity to design the carbon shell, because that would enhance my capacities to survive. Maybe I would not be run over by cars because I would be able to go faster. If I was be able to build some wheels under myself, I would go faster. I would not spend hours to go to some place I need to go. I need to go across the street. I will be there tomorrow morning. But if you give me the cognitive faculties, maybe I would survive better also. Why is the number of species that having cognitive faculties limited? That's the question we're asking. Andy, you want to say something?
I'm just wondering, why wouldn't the evolutionists say that our reason is more developed? And my question is also, what is the difference between reason and instincts to the evolutionists?
Yes. Yeah, well, reason and instinct would be a very long answer. But to say it, to make a long story short, number one is, if they are saying, yeah, we are more developed than others, the question will be why? Why would, and again, if you ask the questions, I ask the question why, you have to answer giving attributes to evolution to make a choice. So, I mean, your question raises the other questions, is why? See what I mean? It's the idea being is that if evolution thinks, again, we have to use that word, that thinking is necessary for the survival of species. Why pick one? Or maybe 2 or 10? Because some scientists think that some animals have some kind of intelligence. It's not obviously not the same thing. But I mean, unless maybe we're wrong. Maybe we think we are the only ones, and the dolphins look at us and they have universities on the ground and they're making mathematics and quantum physics. I read the quantum physics by the human. They are so stupid. This is reality of quantum physics. And we know it doesn't happen. But you see what I mean? It's like the idea is why out of 9 million species, and some even think there is 22 million species in the world. We don't know, because that's an estimation, because we don't know that many million species. We know just a few percentage of that. We're just thinking this is how much they are. Why they don't agree between 9 and 22 millions. But the more there is, the more the question stands. I mean, why are we the only ones, or are we very, very limited the number of species that actually? Because when you ask, the idea is to push the evolutionists, back to the wall, asking, when you ask the questions, why? Because it is necessary for the survival. Okay, well, if it is necessary, why not all of the species has some kind of reasoning process that will help them progress? Why are we the only one? That's the question we're asking. And now the difference between a reason and instinct is the difference between, I will give you what the Bible says to me is I don't know what the scientists would say, but the difference is one is made in the image of God and the other one is not. So we can think because God can think, and the animals are not made in the image of God. I don't know what scientists says. Maybe somebody knows. I don't know. Anybody wants to say something? No, nobody knows. But you know. You do.
Another question could be, why is man the only species that does drugs, watches pornography, gets all these kind of things which, in a sense, are counter-evolutionary?
Yes. Anyway, sin, again, if you read the book by Chesterton, he's actually saying that, I'm trying to remember the quote exactly, but he's actually saying that natural liberal theologians and materialists are actually denying the reality of the original sin, which is the only doctrine that can be proven. Meaning, if you look around you, there is proof of original sin. And sin is a big, I think, you remember what we said earlier in the class? The more coherent we are, the more stronger our arguments will be. This is what Chesterton says in this chapter 6 of the paradox of Christianity. Is showing that the more coherent you are, the more you stick to the doctrines of the Bible, the more relevant you are to the reality of human beings, and that's very important also. Yeah, it's a good question. Sin. How can you explain that as an evolutionary? Okay. One more question that we can ask also, I think, is, we said, why are we the only ones, supposing we are the only ones? But anyway, if we are not the only ones, and if there is, 15 species with amazing cognitive faculties, that we don't know that, but let's say we give that to, why out of 9 million or maybe 22 million, why only 15? And that's the question number 2. And if this is so important to survive, how did the 9 other million survive without it? That's another question. We needed it to survive. We're here. They didn't have it. They're still here also. What happened to them? So it was not necessary at all. If they survived without it, we could have survived without it. So why is it necessary? So it's again begging the questions. I'm asking you, why do we have it? You're saying to me it's necessary, but we are the only one who have it, and the other guys who didn't have it, they are still there too. Right? Like a snail is still here. And according to, I don't know if you've seen a crocodile, but a crocodile doesn't seem to be a very intelligent being. The only thing he does, he sees you, he wants to eat you. This is it, the food. So that's the extent of his thinking. Now, according to evolutionary model, he's been there since the dinosaurs. So one of the stupidest animal we have has been there for the longest. So it actually defeats your arguments. So he does not have any cognitive faculties the way we understand it. He doesn't have the reasoning process that would make him a great species. Because if he would, he likes to eat, so if he had the intelligence to do something, he would find weapons to help him hunt. But sometimes he doesn't eat for days because it's not easy to eat because he has to grab you, twisting his head when he eats you, depending how you are. So it's not very, if he had some tools to help him, he would be happy about it, but he does not. But he survived, and he survived very well according to the evolutionary model without any help of cognitive faculties. So, so that means that if he did survive, and he's been there longer than we've been, according to the evolutionary model, then why is cognitive faculty necessary? Where is it? Are you seeing the point? Okay, are you there? Some of you are there, good. All right, let's move. Yes? Yes.
If they repeat them, if the greatest greatest nature movies out there, the most popular ones are when they catch animals doing some kind of human act. If a dolphin shows a little love, last year there was a very big nature movie where a monkey, it seemed like he was washing his armpits with soap. Just the slightest little human reflection, and it's a huge hit. They even played in the big movies. And the reality is that they're so far away from us that it is shocking when when they think.
Yeah, exactly. You nailed it. The thing is, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, number one, we're selling the likeness as being something that it's shaped like us. He has to look like us. But well, I'm not a scientist again, but what I know, what I read from arguments, is that some of the animals that don't look like us at all are closer genetically than those who look like us. So that's beside the point. So actually, to me, it's marketing. We are marketing. It's like he looks like us. We have to, because the idea is, remember if you go back to Charles Darwin, the idea of he studied with birds, in the Galapagos. This is the idea, and what he's shown actually it's what we call microevolution, to adapt to your own environment, and obviously we see that it's possible to happen. It's like the reason why we tan in the sun. It's not because we look nicer. It's because it's better for our skin to tan in the sun. So we actually are adapting to our environment. The idea is not microevolution. The idea is macroevolution. That we cannot prove. That we cannot show. But what you said is amazing, because actually the reason why we put it on TV is because it's so rare. So if it is so rare and that we're amazed at it, it's because it's unusual. So if it is unusual, then it's not common. And if it's not common, then we don't look alike. So you actually, by showing it on TV in prime time, you're making a point that you're actually making our point. Is that you're making it a big deal because it's so rare. Look, he can do like us. Yes, he was not supposed to. So you're actually saying that he doesn't look like us. It's an accident that he looks like us. So you made a point for us. So yes, that's a very good point. You can, sure.
When I studied the development of the brain, it was obvious, and our doctor maybe you can say this much better than I, but there's like 3 stages of development in the brain, and the first one is the reptile stage that is all about the closest, like warmth and love, and so the way the brain develops is from survival skills to critical skills, and critical skills are the last skills to develop. And if these other layers are not there, if there's a, for some reason they've been destroyed or not properly developed, proper critical skills do not develop. And that, I think, it so strongly supports the, thinking must support survival. first than anything else, and this practical wisdom has to be at all times, and that's why our educational system is so wrong, because it has gone way beyond to high academia without understanding the foundation of thinking.
Yes, we are thinking in theory, not in practice. Yeah, exactly. Before we move on to the third point, I don't know if you heard about William Paley. William Paley is an apologist, which I don't recommend everything he says. But one thing he said, and it's a very famous story. He said, if you go in nature and you find a watch in nature, that you don't assume that it's a miracle of nature. You assume that somebody lost it and somebody made it. And the idea is that when you think about this, the way that the brain functions, and there is, I think if I recall, there is 1,500 more synapses in one brain than the number of stars there is in the Milky Way. That's a lot of synapses, and a lot of connections. Now, if you multiply that by 7 billion people on the Earth, that's a lot more of synapses on the Earth than there is stars in the Milky Way. It's a very complicated system. And what William Paley is saying is very simple. If you find a watch, in nature, you know that somebody lost it. You know that somebody designed it. And, think about this. We'll talk about this maybe sometimes Thursday, tomorrow or Friday night. But people are thinking with science, if you're an engineer in communications, you can lecture on this phone for hours. You can explain to it. But if you explain the iPhone, does it mean that you don't need an Apple factory to make it? Does it need? If I explain how my iPhone functions, did I explain away the maker? I did not explain away the maker. And this is what science is all about. Science is explaining the mechanics of the world, but it's not explaining the agent that is behind it. If I can explain it, for me, a scientist who tells you we don't need God today in the 21st century because we have science, it is as stupid as if I would tell him, you know what, I don't think Apple exists. I can explain the iPhone. I know how it works. If I push the button that it's on, I slide like this and I put a number in it, and boom, I'm into it. And look, I can click here and I have a message from René. I will respond later. But I can do that. I can explain. And guess what? I know how to turn it off. And voila. So profound. I don't need an Apple factory. Apple does not exist, and Steve Jobs is a myth. He never existed. I just proved it to you. I can show you how it works. Why do we need an Apple factory? This is exactly what people are saying when they are telling you that we don't need God today, we can explain the universe. Well, first, you don't explain the universe because you don't understand all of it. So before you say such a bold statement, just wait a little bit. And because you might very well change your theory in a couple of decades. You don't know that. And also, the fact that you explain the universe does not mean that you explain the origin of the universe or the agenda behind it. That's something that is very important. Now we need to move on, and we go back to number 3. Remember what it was? So we explained that if you are an atheist, then you're left with materialism, and you have no explanation for reason, and now we have no meaning for life. That is very, very important to understand this, I think. And this is what C.S. Lewis said. And this is, I think this sums up what I want to say about this point. Number 1, he says, I believe in Christianity as I believe that the sun has risen, not only because I see it, but because by it, I see everything else. What he says by that, when you look at the sun, you look at it and you're thinking, well, it exists. But deeper than that, you understand the world because you have light, right? If you look around you, if we switch off the light, then we don't see anything and we don't understand the world around us. Somebody who is blind, he will never know how the people he loves looks like. It's the same with what he means by that. He says, I believe in Christianity not because like I see it, but I see everything else by it. Like everything makes sense when you think about Christianity. That's the point. The meaning of life has meaning because there is Christianity. So what brought him to Christ as an atheist, and if you want to read his biography, Surprised by Joy, it's an amazing book. And he explained in the book that that's not in the book, that's in another collection of essays. But what he says is very simple. I believe in Christianity like I believe in the sun. Not because the sun is there, but because when the sun is there, I see everything else. And that's very important. This is what he means by that. And this is what we want to talk about. Let's go to another quote. I want to make a few points on this one. So this is Van Til, the Dutch apologist, for those who are Dutch around us. This is what he says. It is just because the world and man are, as scriptures teach, created for one another and directed toward their goal through redemption by Christ, that human predication is possible. Now in philosophy, predication is not preaching. Predication is the utterance of meaningful words, meaning that I can say something that is authoritative because there is something that backs it up. That's a predication, okay, in philosophy. So the idea being is that for the world to have any meaning, it has to be the way the Bible describes it. If there is a God, there is meaning. If there is no God, there is no meaning. Now, I mean, as we heard yesterday, when Pastor Kimo trapped me with his last question last night about how would you respond, I said, I cannot respond. This is exactly the point, is that if you don't believe in God, then you have to believe that there is no meaning in life. And then if you're okay with it, then we're in trouble. But the point is, most people are not okay with it. They are trying to make a meaning, create a meaning on their own. So the point is, is that, and he says, by the same token, reasoning with unbelievers is possible and fruitful for believers, just as so far as believers remain true to their own basic presuppositions. Meaning, if I abandon my ideas of thinking that, I believe in truth because there is God, or I believe in my own presuppositions, then I weaken my argument. So true to this presupposition that God exists, they can, for argument's sake, place themselves with the unbeliever on his presuppositions. That's the reductio we talked about, in order to show him that he cannot even raise an intelligible objection against the Christian view. For in objecting to the Christian view, he has to presuppose its truth. And this is exactly what C.S. Lewis said earlier when he said, where is it? At the end, unless I believe in God, I cannot believe in thought, so I can never use thought to disbelieve in God. The idea being is that to actually say something that is meaningful, you have to presuppose that your thoughts and your predication, in that sense, is meaningful. Well, to do that, you have to have a belief in God because you have to believe in absolute truth. So to say something against Christianity, you have to actually believe like a Christian, like your words are meaningful. But if God does not exist, then your words are meaningless. Because number one, life is meaningless, and number two, your reason capacity cannot be proven to be reliable. So you're in big trouble. Yes?
Is it not possible to believe in absolute truth and not believe in God?
Well, some believe, I would say most people do believe in absolute truth and not believe in God. Now, why can they believe in absolute truth? That they cannot explain. The idea being, okay, how can I put it? Well, for us to gain knowledge, let's say it's us. Okay, we are the 7 billion humans on the face of the earth. Nobody else. You are about to gain knowledge. There has to be absolute truth. Which one of us has it? Which one of us? It's a question. Let's say it's if we are the 7 billion people on the earth. It's just us. There is no God. And I'm saying there is absolute truth. Who has it among the 7 billion of us? The strongest? The most intelligent? How do we know he's intelligent? We have to presuppose that his cognitive faculties are reliable, and I can prove that. So there is no intelligence in the world if there is no absolute truth. So who has it? We can debate that. It's me. No, it's me. No, it's all of us. How do we know? Am I the absolute truth? I don't know, because you don't agree with me. If you don't agree with me, one of us don't have the absolute truth. Why should it be me and not you? Or why should it be somebody else? That's, in a simple way, to show that there has to be some kind of ultimate reference to actually say, yes, that's true, yes, that's false. Just like in a courtroom, you need a judge to make a decision. And we all agree, we had to agree, we come with an assumption that he will make a decision, and he's appointed for that, and we'll have to accept. If he sentenced me to 20 years prison, I will go 20 years in prison. I will not say, hey, forget it, I'm out of here, No. We all agree this is the case, so there has to be some absolute reference. Now, who is it if it's none of us? That's where, you see, the point is that if it's none of us, and we can agree who is, and if we agree there would have to be a compromise somehow, we have to come with some kind of agreement that everybody will have to agree with. Not everybody will agree anyway, because 7 billion of people will never agree on that. So the only way for us to have an absolute truth, there has to be something that transcends us. So if it transcends us, and it has to transcend us, it has to be beyond us, well, who is it? Because if it's not a person, if it's a thing, then there is no obligation towards it. I have no obligation to go to the pen. I can take it and throw it and break it. I don't care. But I cannot mistreat you because you're a person. So, and that's the idea. We'll go back to the argument from ethics later during the day, but the argument, what we call the axiological argument, the argument from the existence of good and evil. Where does that come from if there is no God? The idea being is that while we believe that the universe is personal over against an impersonal universe, is that if there is no person behind it, then ethics is not obligatory. It's optional. Does it make sense for you? Andy? Microphone. Pastor Simon is off his break. He had a break. This is why he didn't give Laura the microphone. But now he's off his break. He's back from his break.
Thank you. So,
I'm sorry, I'm picking up my valuable pen.
Don't hurt it. So Van Til is just saying we should seek to understand their worldview. Like, go into their house and say, okay, explain to me how it exists. Like, is that what Van Til's quote is saying? That we should seek to understand them, get their perspective, and get the reasons why and how they can live their life the way they do?
Well, he says that, but he also says that you need to bring to absurdity the line of argument. That's the idea. It's like, this is what we're doing. If you're an atheist, then you have problems. And I want to show you that. So if you really believe as an atheist, and if you agree with me with all the 4 points I make and you're fine with this, then we go back to last night. There's nothing I can do for you. But do you understand? So the idea is to bring to absurdity your reasoning, because I want to do something is, I want to show him again, we go back to Romans 1:18, I want to show you that you're suppressing the truth. By suppressing your truth, you enter into foolishness. If I show the foolishness of your philosophy, I'm showing you that you have to suppress the truth because you will have to make a decision. Once I discover that my thinking and philosophy is foolishness, what do I do with this? Do I stick to it? Then I know I'm suppressing the truth. Then I made my point. And then if you don't want to hear more, at least I showed you that you suppress the truth.
So I also heard it, the one asking the questions is the one leading the discussion, right? So like a lot of our apologetics is asking the right questions?
I think so.
Okay.
It depends, because there is two sides to apologetics. That we said there is a defensive approach and there is the offensive approach. The offensive approach, I will ask a lot of questions. The defensive approach, I will answer a lot of questions. Meaning that I need to answer those legitimate questions. So it really depends. I don't know. Some of you maybe met a lot of people who have a lot of questions, but it's. I spend a lot more time answering questions than I do asking questions, because I rarely find people who are really strong atheists and are really willing to. But it's growing. It's really growing, and people who go to university, they read a lot of books. Sam Harris, Dawkins, and all these guys, not because they have to, because they are recommended to do it, but it's not even in their curriculum. Richard Dawkins is in no university curriculum, but professors advise that it would be good for you to read it. But obviously, it cannot be in a curriculum. It doesn't make any sense. It's not an academic book. But still, people are encouraged to read it. Okay. Let's start, and then we have a break, because we usually take a break around 10. Okay, so I believe in Christianity as I believe in the sun, that the sun has risen, not only because I see it, but because by it I see everything else. So the point is making is that we understand the world, and the world is meaningful when we have a reason to understand it. Just as the sun enlightens the world that we can see around us, then the Christianity opens the way for us to understand life, and we understand it for what it is. So we went through what Van Til says also, and we don't want to make more point on that. The reason, so the number one thing we need to say when we talk about meaning is that, number one, I'm sure you know this word. You know this word, intelligible? Something that makes sense. So, the first thing we're making is, if there is no God, then the life is meaningless, and the world should not be intelligible for us. We should not be able to relate to it if we are randomness. Not only we relate to ourselves, meaning that I can think in myself, I can have some logical process, I can understand, and when I talk to you, you understand, and even though we don't have the same language, we have the same logical process, we assume that. But not only that, but we also relate to reality outside of us. It works. I can make science because I believe it's possible for science to happen, because I believe the world speaks to me. I believe I can understand it. I believe I can make experiments. The world is intelligible. If it's not the case, this is what C.S. Lewis is saying by saying he believes in this, that the sun, just like the sun is risen, and because he sees everything by it, then the world around us makes sense because there is a God. I understand why my cognitive faculties are reliable, because God exists. I understand why I can believe in objective truth, because God exists. Because when Laura raised the questions about the absolute truth, there is another question also, is objective truth, which sounds like a synonym, but it's not the same thing. To be absolute is one thing, to be objective is another thing. To have some objective truth, there has to be some outsider, to make it objective for us, at least as human beings, as a race. So I think personally that the only explanation that can explain why the world is intelligible to us is Christianity, or at least religion, that has a God. If you want to include monotheism as a whole, maybe the Jewish religion, the Muslim religion, the Christian religion, both think that there is a God. He has absolute truth. Though if you study Islam, you will see that the understanding of God is not as absolute as the Christian understanding of God. It's very different, actually. But in their mind, they don't even realize that. They don't even know that. So number one, the world is intelligible to me, and it is meaningful. And then I cannot explain why it is the case if there is no God. And number two, if I don't believe in God, nothing is meaningful. There is no meaning at all. But worse than that, not only there is no meaning, but there is no value. We go back to materialism, as we said earlier. If you and I have not been designed by God, then we're just a product of evolution, right? So we've been there by randomness. And we happen to have some cognitive faculty that is superior to the other ones. So we make a difference between us. If I kill a dog, or if I kill a man, I'm not going to be sentenced the same way. Maybe in some countries I won't be sentenced because maybe I can eat the dog that I killed. So we make a difference of value between human beings and dogs, right? We do. Now, on what ground? On what ground? Because we're more intelligent? So if that's true, you don't seem to agree with us, but if that's true, then the most intelligent among us should be able to kill the other ones that are not as intelligent too. Why? If there is no meaning and value and difference in materialism, I know there is a difference, and we all know there is, but why is there? Pastor Kimo, you want to say something? You don't? Okay.
What Hitler said?
I'm sorry?
Isn't the materialism and evolutionary thinking of Hitler isn't that exactly where it led him?
Well, Yeah, is it what materialism led to? I mean, I would agree with Stalin. It's for Hitler, it's very debatable because it's not that clear because of the involvement of church during the Nazi regime. It's the argument doesn't seem to be as sharp. But I agree with you. Stalin is a great example. Pol Pot is a great example of that, and we agree that what values actually it's not humans against other humans is an ideal against human beings, and human beings could be destroyed for the sake of the ideal. And actually, that's the implications. People like it or not. The 20th century and communism mainly killed 80 million people in the span of 50 years, and those 80 million people were killed because of the implications of atheism. That's not debatable. Now, the issue whether or not we can debate Hitler and all that, I believe Hitler was not a Christian, obviously, and I believe the church that supported him didn't know better. So this is not about God, this is about religion. So I believe that we could include him, but I'm just saying that some people would argue with that. If you use Hitler as an example, people would not agree, but they have to agree with you if you use Stalin as an example. But it's exactly the point. Let's go back to the argument. We don't have any meaning because there is no absolute truth. And I believe there is absolute truth, though I don't believe in God, because I have to, because life is meaningless. Now I find meaning, but I cannot explain why I think life has meaning. Again, let me say this very clearly. We are not saying that the atheist doesn't have meaning in his life. I'm not saying that the atheist does not make sense in his reasoning. I'm saying he does not know why it makes sense. And he does not know why his life is meaningful in a way, why he's working for a better job, why does he spend years and years in university to have a great job. He doesn't know why. Why? He wants his life to be successful. Why? He does not know why. Because life is meaningless, but he thinks life is meaningful. Now, the difference between, I go back to the value. The difference between, and then we go back to the idea of instinct, and the question was, who asked the question? Yeah. You did ask the question, different reason and instinct. The different, why do we, on what ground are we making, and I'm going to go further with it, but on what ground are we making a difference between an animal and a human being in terms of value on a purely materialistic, atheistic ground? But you see the implications now. I'm thinking, oh, you're exaggerating when you're thinking the most intelligent should kill the less intelligent. Well, this is what's happening. You know that I don't know if it's the case here, but one of the reasons why we abort children is because they have a sickness. Don't we? When you pass 40 years old for a woman, then you have a special exam that you make. We say amniocentesis. You have that. And if your child is positive on the test, you can get rid of it. To me, this is the application of materialism. Because actually, why do you want to get rid of this specific child? Not because you don't want child. You don't want this one. So people are saying abortion should be okay because I should be able to decide when I want to have a children. Well, this is why we have, a contraception. Okay, well. But let's say I don't want contraception, whatever. It's a free world. Do whatever I want. I can kill as many children as I want. Fine, you have that. But you want a children. You are pregnant. You discover he has a sickness. You kill it, and you wait to have another one. That is, to me, troubling. If you accept the idea of abortion as being okay, it's a free world. We do whatever we want. It's a free country. Fine. Why would you select a child that is worthy of living and not another one? You are actually making a value system according to these children will be handicapped, and because of his handicap, he cannot be accepted in the society. It would be too much trouble for me. It's not convenient. So I'm going grocery shopping. I'm designing the child that I want. And this, to me, this is one of the things we're talking about. We are actually taking the theory of the meaninglessness of life, and we are doing this with it. And the other thing also, we think about abortion. In France, it's very interesting, the debate, because abortion has been there since the 70s. So we have abortion, for a long time. But the stem cell research is a big issue. And we don't have stem cell research. And you know why? Because stem cell research means that you need embryos, right? At their first stage to do the research. Now, people don't want to do that because they say you should not play with life. Well, if an embryo is life, why do we accept abortion? Because if an embryo is life, then killing an embryo or a fetus that is so many weeks, then it's killing life too. Doesn't make any sense. So it's not like, I mean, we don't discover that atheism doesn't make any sense, but we're actually making a point that it's the implications of the meaninglessness of life are starting to emerge in our society today. Okay, so it's past 10, we need to make a break. We go back to these very fascinating discussions in 20 minutes.